piece, we can talk about the various tools in more detail. Let's start at the beginning with the first verse. Now, as musicians, we don't want our music to be written off from the very beginning, so we have to give a confident, respectable presentation of the first verse. Therefore, the first verse of the standard form is a standard presentation of the hymn, mezzo forte to forte, standard harmonies. We want to have this serve as a standard for everything else we're about to do, as in the technique of theme and variations. Next, let's step back for a moment so that we can appreciate the larger floor plan. Where are we going in any hymn? We are headed towards the grand eschatological last verse. So, do we want to end with a whimper or with a bang? Of course we want to end with a bang. So we know our endpoints, we know where we're starting, and where we're headed. So between these endpoints, what happens? Clearly, there needs to be movement upwards. In other words, we need to build up musically as we hit each successive verse. Now, we could certainly do this linearly and add just a little bit each verse. But instead, to give us more headroom, and thus allow us to angle upwards even more sharply, we do something special. As we enter the second verse, we suddenly turn the volume down. In fact, the second verse of a choral arrangement is sometimes performed completely a cappella, with the choir in parts, of course. This has a number of advantages. After the first verse, which is the verse that people are usually the most familiar with, withdrawing the music actually helps to throw an intense musical spotlight on the choir and the lyrics, setting up the unfolding story of the hymn. So that covers the second verse. As the story of the hymn continues to develop and tension rises, we add in and change up the instruments. On the organ, for instance, with each verse we usually pull out more and more stops. Toward the end, we may embellish the melody. We may add a descant or a thoberdome, as is immediately apparent at the beginning of Wilcox's third verse. In addition, we may use subtle reharmonizations, as Wilcox has been doing all along. And although he doesn't do it here, we may also modulate between verses, that is, change keys, usually upwards by 1 or 2 half steps. All of these techniques we will cover shortly. And then finally, we arrive at the grand last verse. Literally and figuratively, we now pull out all the stops. Up till this point, the choir has been singing in parts, but now they sing in unison, fortissimo, with a focused, coherent power. To underscore this, even the instruments sometimes temporarily join the choir in unison. As we continue, we use a special last verse arrangement, usually involving radical reharmonization, especially with secondary dominance, chromatic bass movements, and pedal points, all techniques that can usually be spotted by their altered bass lines. This is a major topic you must understand. The special and usually reharmonized last verse is the most important and consistent element in the tradition of hymn arrangement. In fact, there are music books published out there that have nothing but specially arranged last verses of hymns, and certain high-quality hymnals like this one, the Hymnal for Worship and Celebration, write out explicitly the arrangement of last verses. In Wilcox's arrangement, reharmonization is rampant, but pay special attention to certain elements drawn from the second half of the last verse. For example, there's this beautiful extended chord. And this pedal point, followed by an ascending chromatic bass line that underlies a series of secondary dominants. Reharmonization is a complex topic that requires some understanding of music theory, so we will explore it later at length. But overall, the last verse of the standard form should, with its power and might, leave the choir breathless and the congregation speechless, and maybe even a little deaf. That temporarily concludes our tour of the floor plan of the standard arrangement of the hymn. For the purposes of our discussion, we have broken up Wilcox's arrangement, but I encourage you to listen to it as a whole to hear how a standard arrangement works and flows. In the next section, then, we will discuss the parts in more detail and break down the standard form into techniques that we can use, which I call the Big Four.